In 1947, my grandfather arrived in Seattle from Arkansas. Within a year, he purchased his first home, 913 24th Avenue in the Central District. In 2005, he passed the home on to me. And one of the first things that I did was to begin cleaning out the two-car garage behind the house. The garage had been his workshop and storage for the family for over 50 years, and it was literally full of stuff. You know, I began to connect with a lot of the items that I was sorting through. I realized that certain objects began to bring up really specific memories about things that had happened in the family. I set these objects aside, and as a photographer, I was really interested at that point in photographing these things. I didn't really know why I wanted to photograph them per se. I just knew that there was something about the energy in them for me that I wanted to spend time with them. And so I set up my studio and I began to photograph specifically the ones that felt close to me, that felt close to memories and stories that I had heard. This grew into a project that eventually became an elegant utility. I use the objects as a way of entering into these family stories and memories. And then I use these family stories and memories as a way of entering into the larger reality of what it meant to be black in the Central District and face racism around housing, around jobs and employment, around lending practices, and all the ways that those things functioned to limit our opportunities. And then what were the ways that we created solutions to navigate around those challenges. And so I was really interested in creating this layered presentation where you could enter in as an observer of personal narratives, but I was also interested in having it function as a historical and social and political exploration and even critique of the realities of living black in Seattle in the 20th century. So one of the central ideas really focused on the ways that we worked together. In the show, I organized the stories into 5 themes: family, home, faith, work, and play. But, you know, the work component of the story is really what I want to focus on here. It would probably be good at this point to kind of start with a little bit of background around what I'm referring to when I talk about working together. What does that mean in our family? Just to kind of give a primer for where I want to go with this particular story about an elegant utility.
Samuel and Marie Green had 8 children: Frank, James, Nita, Bertie, Betty, DeTroya, and the 2 twins, Stella and Zerelda. Oh, the 8 siblings were very close together, very close knit as family members. It just so happens that once the first house was purchased, the family wanted to be in close proximity to each other, so they were buying properties and buying homes that was in close to the initial home that was purchased. Redlining in Seattle caused problems the same way it caused problems in all the cities that experienced redlining. Those of us who lived within the redlined area could not get loans either to purchase homes, home improvements, to buy investment property, nothing. The banks simply were not loaning to people in that area. And I doubt seriously had any of us lived outside the redlined areas, they still wouldn't have loaned to us. So it really didn't make any difference. And I think also because many of us migrated from the South, there is a certain degree of self-sufficiency that one came to the North with, understanding that reliance upon white people in many cases was not going to be an option, that we had to find ways to provide for ourselves. The houses in our family were maintained primarily because Frank Green was a self-taught plumber, carpenter, roofer, electrician. You name it, he had books on everything, and he taught himself how to do it all, maintained every single house himself, hired his nephews to help. He would teach them how to do things. So all of the houses were maintained by people in the family until he was up in age and could not do most of it himself. But even then, he was willing to teach if he was able to do so. At the time, I was living in Marion House, and this was in the 1990s. When the house was going to be painted, I had picked out a color, and he was hiring my sons to paint the house. Now I'm coming downstairs from the second floor to the first floor, and there's a bay window there, and there's scaffolding outside because the house is going to be painted. And I'm looking out there, and I see my father up to what would be the equivalent of at least 2.5 stories minimum on this scaffolding at 85 years old, and wondering, excuse my language, what the hell at his age he's doing up there. But he's showing my sons how the house needs to be painted, how they need to scrape off the old paint, sand it down until it's smooth before applying the new layers of paint. Quite frankly, I was proud of the fact that he could get up there at that age. He also showed, if I'm not mistaken, one of my sons, when we needed the front of the house to be reshaped, he spent a half a day or a day with him, showing him how to cut the shakes, how to apply them. And these were just, regular rectangular shakes, put them up there and nail them on. Well, my son decided we needed something better than just plain old rectangular shapes. So he started cutting shakes that were in triangular, diamond shape, pointed fascias, and did a beautiful, beautiful job. Looked professional. Just absolutely gorgeous job of putting the facade on the second floor of that house with only 1 day's training. I commend my son. I have to commend my father because he did so much with so little, but he had so much determination in doing so.
The work was always delegated to the family first before going outhouse.
So we had a lot of relatives who were in the trades who worked on the family properties as well, most of which were cousins and uncles. That was Michael, Mickey, you had Gregory, Peter, the list goes on. I think there was a lot of the men in the family were tradesmen. And so a lot of them most of them had first dibs on the work that had to be done on the family property.
So that money was always circulating, either in the form of rent, which he rented to family. In turn, we gave that money back to him and put that right back into the pot, which then went back to the maintenance. I played a role in that along with my brothers and sisters. We were always painting houses. We were always doing something in the yard. We were always trimming trees. So this is how we got our start. Learning how to use these power tools, knowing how to cut in a paint line or whatever it may have been.
The shake siding on my mother's house was a job my grandfather gave me in the summer of 1998. That summer, he gave me 2 other jobs as well, helping my brother paint my mother's house and painting the main house and the duplex in the backyard of 911 24th Avenue. I had been out of college for 2 years and came to my grandfather for a loan to start my photography business. Instead, he told me that I could earn the money by painting the family houses. It wasn't until later when I began to reflect on these experiences that their meaning began to dawn on me. We were engaging in a family tradition that was directly related to the political realities that our community faced. So while my grandfather was never directly involved in the politics of confronting racial discrimination, he definitely developed his own way of addressing those problems and creating solutions that worked for us. I talked about an elegant utility being a layered presentation that uses personal stories as a way of exploring the political realities that we live inside of. So I want to introduce Michael Wu, who is a close friend of mine and a colleague and mentor in community organizing in Seattle. Michael has been involved in labor rights activism for at least 40 years.
So I think I was around 21 years old when I first got involved. I was working at the airport, and it was when the economy was really bad, and I got laid off. At that time, I was already married. I had a son and another child on the way. But to keep my unemployment going, they had me go to an organization called the United Construction Workers Association in 1970. It wasn't a place where you could get a job. These were men and women from the community who had been fighting against the exclusion of people of color from the construction industry. In 1969, in 5 of the major skilled trades, the iron workers, the plumbers and pipe fitters, electricians, sheet metal workers, and then the 5th one was the operating engineers. In those 5 trades, there were fewer than 10 African American workers in their membership of over 5,000. And back in those days, just those numbers alone constituted evidence of a pattern of discrimination. They were saying, man, we got to go out and fight for these jobs, and we're going to do it because we're going to make our voices heard, and we're going to march, we're going to picket, we're going to protest, and we'll do, shutting projects down by any means possible. They were having almost meetings every night. We'd be planning actions and activity, and I found myself going to every one of those meetings. And so I stayed involved as a volunteer with United Construction Workers through 1971, and by 1972 I got hired on staff in largely an African American led organization. But the leadership of the organization were visionaries. Tyree Scott and Todd Hawkins and Barbara Bird and Harley. And there's a whole bunch of, I can't even name them all. They became not only my mentors, but to this day, they have been my best friends.
After over 3 decades of working for labor rights for people of color, Michael Wu founded Got Green to help young people find pathways into the green energy industry.
I wasn't looking to build an organization. I was really looking to learn more about what this green economy was about. And because I'm an organizer, I was looking to involve other people, right? And when I say other people, I meant specifically younger folks, right? Because the need in our community was always around employment opportunities. If young people didn't get opportunities in the green economy, it would have been a travesty.
For 8 years, I volunteered as a media consultant and a media producer, and I served on the board of the organization. I was so impressed with the work that Got Green was doing that I pulled my brother Yidam in.
I got introduced to Got Green, which was doing work around inclusiveness in the trades, and gaining a relationship with that organization and Michael Wu specifically, who was heading it at the time, presented the opportunity for me to work into the trades via union, which was Liuna at the time. So Michael Wu actually took the initiative. Let me say this. He went above and beyond and actually called me up and asked me if I wanted to go to work. And I guess he was in the process of either knowing Calli Rudolph with EcoFab. But either way, they were not a startup, but I think they were starting a leg in the company that had to do with residential weatherization. And he threw my name out there, and they were interested, and he drove me to the job site, and they gave me the job. And that's pretty much how I got into it. At the time, Michael Wu was the guy. He was the game. He was one of the only few people that I knew who was actually doing the community work, putting in the footwork, like actually going and searching for candidates who were interested in participating in or becoming a part of the trades and labor unions and providing those opportunities. But he also understood that if there wasn't a demand for those opportunities to be created, that they wouldn't be. And so he took that passion and found other people who had that same passion and built a team and made it happen.
Whenever I asked Michael Wu what it is he wanted me to do, he always said the same thing. I just want you to work. We need you to be represented. We need you to be a reflection of what it looks like for people of color in the trades. Part of breaking through that barrier was petitioning to get the targeted local hire, priority hire initiative passed through the city council, working with the mayor and the city council. And what that means is that people like myself now have an opportunity to work in the neighborhoods that we live in, which is also plays a role in the Green Initiative also, meaning that we don't have to commute as far as riding the bus or contributing to the destruction of the environment through driving our cars and carbon emissions. I mean, all this played a role. As well as being able to not only live in the neighborhoods, but work in these neighborhoods, gain a living wage to support ourselves and our family.
I guess I was inspired by the young people that were part of that original group of Got Greeners, right? They weren't satisfied with the lip service, right, that they were getting from elected officials or from unions. They wanted more. And in fact, when they started to see that their presence in these meetings was starting to change the narrative on how people talked about green jobs, that there had to be an equity solution, then I said, man, we're on to something.
By the time I had mounted an elegant utility, my friendship with Michael was about 10 years old. It was important for me to share this part of my story with him. I wanted him to see how our family created solutions that were a direct response to our political situation. And even though the solutions were not explicitly political in terms of confronting the power structure, they were very pragmatic responses to the challenges. And so it was a little surprising when the first thing he said to me is, you know, I know your cousin Mickey and I know your cousin Peter. When I was a part of the United Construction Workers Association, I was a part of the cohort that helped them get trained in the electrical trades. And at that moment, it became clear to me that beyond my brother Yidam, Michael's influence on my family went way deeper than I imagined. All the things that I was really wanting to explore and understand through this project began to crystallize. That in 2017, as I'm living in the Central District and I'm experiencing the complete dissolution of the community that I grew up in, I began to understand that community in ways that I had never understood it before. A community is an ecosystem of relationships. And that ecosystem allows for new and dynamic things to happen, things that you would never imagine. And like ecosystems in nature, it needs to be diverse and alive and active in order to be healthy. And so as I watched gentrification and displacement systematically degrade that ecosystem, I wanted to understand what were the implications of what we were losing. And here in this small collection of stories, I was beginning to understand how complex our relationships are, how robust our relationships are, how far-reaching our relationships are, and how important it is for us to really value those things and to value the ecosystem that nurtures them. And for me, that's what this project is about. So this is the story I wanted to tell most about an elegant utility in this moment, about two people who were very important to me, who had very different ways of confronting institutional racism. But because we were together in community, we came together as family, as friends, and we made change.